Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. A couple of days ago, former President Bill Clinton gave a speech, and I can't remember exactly where the speech was. I'll post a link to the article and to the speech in the description box so that you can see the speech for yourself and so that you could actually read more information about that speech. But he gave this speech. And these young activists, members of Black Lives Matter, they interrupted the speech. They protested against Bill Clinton. They were protesting against mass incarceration. They were protesting against welfare reform. And I commend these young people. I salute these young people. I respect these young people because these young people are our hope. They are our future. They are something else. They are soldiers for the people, unlike many of these sellout politicians who couldn't give a damn about the people, who are more concerned about their political advancement, more concerned about campaign contributions, more concerned with receiving a pat on the head from Hillary Clinton and a few damn dog biscuits. They are complete sellouts. They can't be relied upon for leadership. They have misled the people for far too long. And I commend these young people for standing up and speaking out because God knows these old sellout politicians won't do so. They won't speak out on these issues. They don't have a heart to do so. They don't have the courage to do so. They are completely corrupted and sold out. Same is true for some of these so-called civil rights leaders and some of these preachers and pastors and whatnot. They are sellouts, so we have to depend on young people to have the courage to speak out, to have the courage and the conviction to speak out against Democrats and Republicans. Some of these others have completely sold out to one side or the other. But that's a whole nother topic. So during this speech, the Black Lives Matter activists asked Bill Clinton about mass incarceration. They were speaking out against mass incarceration. They were speaking out against that crime bill that led to the mass incarceration of black people. So Bill Clinton, just like the snake he is, just like the slick talking, smooth talking pimp that he is, he tried to bamboozle these young people with a whole bunch of half-truths and outright lies. When they talked about this crime bill, Bill Clinton tried to suggest, well, it's not really a federal problem. It's not a problem that's created by the federal government. Most of the people are locked up in state prisons and local prisons, not federal prisons. He said like 90% of the people who are locked up are in state prisons or local prisons. And a lot of Clinton apologists, a lot of these Clinton sycophants, these Clinton groupies, they parrot this same talking point as well. But the fact of the matter is that crime bill created all kinds of incentives for local jurisdictions to impose stricter penalties for drug offenses. They gave all kinds of funding to these states and local governments who imposed harsher penalties for drug offenses. They gave them money. They gave them more police. They gave them training. They gave them technology. They funded their prisons. They funded more police officers on the street in exchange for these jurisdictions adopting harsher penalties for drug offenses. And as a result of that, you had more people incarcerated in federal and state prisons more than any other president in history. That's what happened under Clinton's administration. And we know what kind of communities they targeted for this drug enforcement. for these law enforcement tactics. They didn't target no suburban white communities. They didn't target any rural white communities. They targeted black communities. They basically declared war on black people. And black people were locked up in massive numbers. And that had a devastating impact on our community. It divided children from their fathers and mothers, much like how slavery divided the family. In fact, when people are incarcerated, they become like slaves. They don't have control over their lives. They are literally shackled up like slaves, and they literally work against their will. That is slavery. The people that are incarcerated under this regime of tough on drugs, they are the new slaves. And even when they leave prison, when they have served their prison time, they leave the prison and they are second-class citizens outside of prison. They are subjected to discrimination in housing, employment, and voting. In many jurisdictions, they don't have the right to vote. So all the things that people used to do to black people in terms of discriminating against us in employment and housing and depriving us of our voting rights, all of those things are legal, still legal, for people who have been convicted of these drug offenses and other felonies. And many of these people who are incarcerated are disproportionately black because those are the communities that were targeted by Clinton and his tough on drugs policy and his 1994 criminal bill. So those young people were right to stand up to this man, to speak out against this man. All these black people locked away. And you got all these damn black fools supporting this man. That's a disgrace. Also, another point that they want to talk about is, the other point that Bill Clinton brought up was this. He said, well, Hillary Clinton wasn't in the Senate. She didn't vote for the bill. And then he talked about how Bernie Sanders voted for the bill. First of all, this is my response to that. Number one, Hillary Clinton, she wasn't in the House or the Senate at the time, but she went around the country giving speeches. She lobbied. She did everything she could to help enact that criminal law, to enact the 1994 crime bill. She went around calling our young black people super predators. She used a racially charged term in order to promote a policy that led to the mass incarceration of black people. And many of these offenders who were locked up under this crime bill, many of them were non-violent offenders. Many of them, most of the people that are locked up, are non-violent drug offenders. The United States has one of the highest incarceration rates in this world. You got more black people right now locked up or under the tutelage of the criminal justice system than you had black people in slavery. So I can't gloss over this. I can't just say that that's no big deal. That is a major deal. That has had a detrimental impact on our community. And for anyone to ignore that, they are ignoring reality. They are in denial. So I salute those young people for speaking out on this issue. Now, they talked about how Bill Clinton talked about how Bernie Sanders voted for this crime bill. And that's what these people use to try to excuse the detrimental role that Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton had on our community. They try to use that excuse. There are videos of Bernie Sanders speaking about that crime bill. And I don't support anybody voting for that crime bill. And, I think that was a wrong decision for any politician to do so. But let's be clear, Bernie Sanders voted for that crime bill because of the domestic violence provisions in it. And he also spoke out against the possibility of mass incarceration. He spoke out on the floor of Congress. He spoke out about the need to address poverty, the need to address the problems that lead to crime in communities. And for all his life in politics, he has fought to bring about equity in the society. He's fought to address the problems of poverty, of income inequality, of injustice. He's fought for those issues. Whereas Hillary Clinton was going around campaigning for more police officers, more prisons, and harsher penalties for black people. So the two can't be compared. Now, Bill Clinton also talked about how Black Lives Matter defends people who kill black people. That's one of the arguments that Bill Clinton used against these activists, against the protesters. First of all, nobody is supporting killers. That's not what this is about. As I said before, most of the people that are locked up under this crime bill, most of them are non-violent drug offenders. They are not the quote-unquote super predators that people talk about. They are not the gangbangers and all that kind of stuff. These are non-violent drug offenders who are incarcerated for many years. Nobody is condoning violence in the community. We are condemning the violence that has been inflicted upon the black community through these mass incarceration type of policies. Now, Bill Clinton also dealt with the issue of welfare reform. Many of the people who were protesting condemned Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton for their support of welfare reform. Their welfare reform policies stripped away all kinds of benefits that poor people depended upon in order to just survive. They ripped apart a safety net that was there for poor people. And they replaced it with something that was far less adequate. And these young people condemned them for doing this, because many of those poor people are disproportionately black. So in response to that, Bill Clinton said that there was the largest drop in poverty in the black community under his administration. He also talked about, just all these benefits that he's provided, and he blamed everything on the Republicans and blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, there was a bubble in the economic markets because of deregulation of Wall Street. So there was a temporary bubble. So you had an increase in jobs. You had an increase in some incomes. But when that bubble collapsed, as is pointed out in the article that I will post in the description box, when that bubble collapsed, many of the benefits that people had before that they could rely upon, that safety net that people could rely upon, wasn't there anymore. It wasn't there. So many poor people suffered under Bill Clinton's welfare reform. And as I pointed out in my blog post, and I'll include it in the card so that you can read that blog post, I point out how the Clintons, along with the Democratic Leadership Council, they basically saw black voters as captive voters. They saw us as people who have nowhere else to go, So they felt like they could marginalize our interests. They felt like they could push us to the side because we were going to be there for them regardless. We were going to vote Democratic regardless of the circumstances. So they could use and abuse us. Much like how an abusive woman beats his wife because he knows that she's not going to leave him. Well, I've had enough of that. And those young soldiers, those young Black Lives activists have had enough as well. So they felt like, the Clintons and these conservative Democrats feel like they can walk all over black people in order to pursue white voters, in order to get more white voters to support them. So they support policies that are tough on crime. So they support welfare reform, which basically what they have done is they have racialized these policies and they have weaponized these policies. Even though there are many poor people, they give welfare a black face. So it's easy to undermine welfare when it's painted black. But that's your Clintons. That's what they have done. They have disregarded our interests. And the only people holding them accountable are our young people. And that's a damn shame. They talked about how all these black politicians supported that crime bill at the time. That's what Bill Clinton talked about in response. He basically made it seem like our communities were in horrible shape, was in such bad shape that you had all these black politicians clamoring in favor of this crime bill. But there are plenty of politicians who oppose that crime bill. And there are even more black politicians who opposed welfare reform. He talked about how crime went down under his administration. Well, crime was already on the decline. And also, I read an NPR article where they talked about this whole issue of mass incarceration and crime rates. And they cited a study from the National Academy of Sciences that basically pointed out how there is a modest relationship between mass incarceration or incarceration and crime. A modest relationship. That means that there is no big tie between incarcerating all these people and reducing crime. So basically, there is no proof that Clinton's crime bill actually reduced crime substantially. Crime was already on a decline. All this talk about super predators ended up turning out to be false. These people made all kinds of ridiculous predictions about the increase in crime. All those predictions ended up being completely false, as noted in a New York Times piece on that issue. Hopefully I'll be able to find that article or that piece and post that in the description box as well. See, I don't just get on here spouting opinions without doing my research. I like to cite my sources so people can look at those sources and evaluate them for themselves. So I'm glad that these young people stood up to this man, because God knows none of these punk ass politicians will. And before I go, let me raise this last point. Bill Clinton brought up the issue of African people, and he talked about all the good work that Hillary Clinton has done in Africa to protect black lives there. Well, let's talk about that for a second. When you were in the White House, Bill Clinton, when the massacre in Rwanda was taking place, you and Hillary Clinton did nothing. You did nothing, not a damn thing. And all those thousands of black lives were lost when you could have done something to prevent that loss of life. So don't preach to us about what you have done for African lives. Don't preach to us about what Hillary Clinton has done for African lives when she helped overthrow a government in Libya. And that overthrow led to a lot of violence there. After that government was overthrown, African people were persecuted and oppressed by the fanatics that took power. So don't preach to us about how you value African lives. With that, I'll just say please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.